I know you. You're that jaywalking punk anarchist.
Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer taking a look at the ABCs of Anarchism. The ABC, I instinctively want to say the ABCs. It sounds better than ABC. What were you thinking, Berkman? Okay. We're taking a look at the ABC of Anarchism by Alexander Berkman, Dover Publications, originally published in 1929. The purpose of this text is to give a crash course in the philosophy of anarchism, the analytical lens, the motivations, the goals of anarchism. In the introduction, Berkman defines anarchism as a condition of society where all men and women, and those that lieth in between, are free and where all enjoy equally the benefits of an ordered and sensible life. And later in the text, he defines communist anarchism as the abolition of government, of coercive authority and all its agencies, and joint ownership, which means free and equal participation in the general work and welfare. Over the course of the text, Berkman uses the philosophy of anarchism to critique capitalism and the wage system, law and government, and war and justice. And to all of these, he provides us with anarchist alternatives, an anarchist theory for a better world, and the preparation, organization, principles, and praxis needed to make that anarchist world a reality. So without further ado, let's take a look at the text in depth. Part 1. Now. To start, Berkman makes a distinction that's incredibly important for understanding what he's trying to say about the world. He states, "Today, no man can live by his own work. He must be helped by the labor of others. All labor and all products of labor are social." And yeah, we all rely on each other for survival. No man is an island and all that. Jeff Bezos didn't work hundreds of millions of times harder than the average Amazon employee. His wealth was created socially. And even you, with whatever meager means you may have, was also created socially. The result of family and friends, your local community, folks all over the world, socially producing what you have. I've used this analogy before, but imagine I'm a total Ayn Randian, individualist, self-made, Ron Swanson, right-wing libertarian type pup, and I took an axe into the woods and made myself a cabin. Now, where did I get that axe from? Well, there is a vast network of resource extraction and transportation and refinery and more transportation and manufacturing and even more transportation and finally retail where I bought the axe. But what if I made the axe myself from scratch somehow, like I was in Ark or Minecraft or whatever? Well, who taught me how to make an axe? Or how to make a cabin for that matter? And who taught those who taught me? And who taught them? And so on. You see, all labor, even me individually producing something with my bare paws out in the woods, is socially produced. Y'all remember what Robotkin said about social production in the Conquest of Bread review?
There is not even a thought or an invention which is not common property, born of the past and the present. Every new invention is a synthesis, the result of innumerable inventions which have preceded it in the vast field of mechanics and industry.
Berkman then defines the economic system in which we live under, the capitalist wage system. He states, "In the capitalist system, the whole working class sells its labor power to the employing class. The workers build factories, make machinery and tools, and produce goods. The employers keep the factory, the machinery, the tools, and get the goods for themselves as their profit. The workers get only wages. This arrangement is called the wage system." Hey, Mr. Moneybags! Shut up and get back to work! Berkman goes on to explain that under this arrangement, we have rights, but that we do not have freedom, because our right to do something is limited by our economic ability to fulfill that right. He argues, you have a right to eat 3 fine meals a day, but if you haven't the means, the opportunity to get those meals, then what good is that right to you? This is like an inverse of that classic Anatole France quote I'm sure you've probably heard before. In its majestic equality, the law forbids rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges. Furthermore, not only are your rights limited by your economic ability is always actively under attack in capitalism. As Berkman explains it, capitalism is not interested in the welfare of the people. A minimum of hands and a maximum of effort is the principle and the profit of the capitalist system. This is essentially about class warfare, about the opposing desires between capitalist and worker. As I've said in plenty of other videos, the worker wants to work at the least intensity for the most pay, and the capitalist wants the worker to work as hard as they can for as little pay as possible. Owners want workers to work as hard as possible for as cheap as possible, and the workers' goals are the exact opposite. In capitalism, in class warfare, you want to work as leisurely as possible for the most pay, and your boss wants you to work as hard as possible for as little pay as possible. Your boss wants you to work as hard as possible for as little pay as possible, and you want the exact opposite. Berkman adds, "It is clear that your interests as a worker are different from the interests of your capitalist masters. More than different, they are entirely opposite, in fact contrary, antagonistic to each other. The better wages your boss pays you, the less profit he makes out of you. The worker wants to work at the least intensity for the most pay, and the capitalist wants the worker to work as hard as..." Yeah, we get the idea. Wait, haven't I made this joke before? Moving on. It's true that under capitalism you have the right to work for a handful of different jobs. There does seem to be a lot of options available, but those jobs will all be authoritarian structures with unelected managers and capitalist owners calling all the shots. But how can we fight this oppressive system? I mean, as we know from our labor history and from every strike and protest for justice ever, the state will always come in on the side of the capitalist system. The state will always use its clubs and guns, its police and its military might to protect the status quo. So how do we stand up against that power? Berkman explains that it is the people, the masses, that provide capitalism and the state with its power, and that we can take the power away by withholding our support. He states, "The strength of government and capital is external, outside themselves. The strength of labor is not external, it lies in itself, in its ability to work and create. It is the only real power." What Berkman is calling for is a general strike, an economic attack on the system. He believes that our attack has to be economic because we won't be able to abolish capitalism through electoral policies. He states, "You can judge for yourself then whether capitalism can be abolished by electing socialists to office or whether socialism can be voted in by the ballot. It is not hard to guess who will win in a fight between ballots and bullets." And Berkman brings up an interesting argument that I think will resonate with you when reflecting on our more left-leaning politicians like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar, the rest of the squad and the Justice Dems and all that. Berkman states, "Visualize for a moment the conditions of a socialist elected to Congress, for instance. He is all alone, as against several hundred men of other political parties. He senses their opposition to his radical ideas, and he finds himself in a strange and unfriendly atmosphere. But he is there and he must participate in the business that is being transacted. Most of that business, the bills brought in, the laws proposed, is entirely foreign to him. It has no bearing whatever on the things the socialist believes in. No connection with the interests of the working class voters who elected him. It is just the routine of legislation. It is only when a bill of some bearing upon labor or on the industrial and economic situation comes up that our socialist can take part in the proceedings. He does, and he is ignored or laughed at for his impractical ideas on the matter, for they are indeed impractical. Even at best, when the proposed law is not specifically designed to grant new privileges to monopoly, it deals with matters involved in capitalist business, with some commercial treaty or agreement between one government and another. But he, the socialist, was elected on a socialist ticket, and it is his business to abolish the capitalist government, to do away with the system of commerce and profit altogether. So how can he speak practically on the submitted bills?" Now, this is a fair criticism and something we will get to later in the text. I think the solution is this. We need a change in paradigm, a change of the tides, and I for one believe that's kind of happening. A lot of local representatives are using the popularity of progressive ideas and making headway in local governments. So if you have a local politician who fits this description, you may want to throw some votes or support their way. But, of course, this should be done in addition to your other praxis, like your membership to Socialist Alternative or the DSA or the IWW or your local union or whatever. To conclude this section, Berkman explains the ways that the Russian Revolution failed to meet the goals that communism and anarchism purports to achieve. Its failures politically, economically, culturally, socially, and morally. For example, Berkman states, "Economically, it was the fundamental aim of the revolution to abolish capitalism and establish communism and equality. The Bolshevik dictatorship began by instituting a system of unequal compensation and discriminating rewards, and ended by reintroducing capitalistic ownership. Anyway, that's it for part 1. Now, you might be thinking, but Radical Reviewer, part 1 literally has like 18 chapters. Are you sure you covered everything? I want an even more in-depth look. And also, inexplicably, I miss your old video quality where your camera was all shaky because your camera human had to lay over the couch in the studio apartment to film you, and it had terrible audio because you were using the camera's stock microphone to record rather than like a professional microphone, so the audio quality sounded like absolute ass. That's what I want to see. Yes, sirree. Well, guess what, oddly specific viewer? You're in luck. Because 3 years ago, I reviewed a book called What is Communist Anarchism by Alexander Berkman, which is part 1 of this book as a standalone text. So go there if you want a more in-depth view on part 1. But for our purposes here, let's move on to part 2, Anarchism. Discussing violence and our relationship to it, Berkman argues that although we may think otherwise, we often rationalize or ignore violence in our own society. The cops had to tear up that homeless encampment. It couldn't stay there forever. The military had to invade that country. They were harboring terrorists, and things like that. And Berkman argues, all of the institutions we support and the entire life of present society are based on violence. You know, you fail to pay your rent and the cops will come and evict you. You sleep on the sidewalk and the cops will come and move you. And if you protest this treatment, they'll spray you with mace and take you to jail. If you work within the system, if you can work within the system, you might not see the violence. But if you fail to work within the system, then the truncheons come out. But it doesn't have to be this way. We could create a system without violent coercion. Berkman looks to this anarchist concept called mutual aid, and he states, mutual need and common interests result in certain arrangements to afford us security and comfort. Such co-working is free, voluntary. It needs no compulsion by any government. This might sound good on paper, but how would it work in practice? You might be thinking, yeah, I would join a local sports team or even volunteer at a local food bank or something, but I'm not about to do my day job for free. But you'd be surprised. Perhaps you've been on YouTube long enough to remember this popular video from 10 years ago? Damn, I'm old. Called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, which explains why someone who does complicated, debilitating work all day will turn around and make mods for games or create free software like Linux or Firefox, or they'll learn a musical instrument or whatever. Why someone who works in a kitchen all day for their day job would turn around and volunteer at a local soup kitchen. Well, this is because a big part about what motivates us to work isn't that we need money to survive, it's about drives for creation and autonomy and feeling socially useful, feeling like our community needs us. Conclusion. Okay, so Berkman says that we should use mutual aid and voluntary common interest to create a better society free from the violence of the state and coercion from capitalism. But like, yeah, that sounds peachy, but how the hell are we supposed to do that, Berkman? How are we supposed to implement these changes? The state, capitalism, our institutions, they're powerful and self-perpetuating. How on earth are... Oh wait, there's totally a third part to this book. Part 3, the social revolution. Okay, so far we've seen how the current system is coercive and violent, but how do we create a new anarchist society? A society that's free from coercion and violence? I mean, that stuff's like gravity, right? It's part of life, it's unavoidable. Berkman argues that our institutions, capitalist firms, the capitalist mode of production and distribution, the bureaucratic state apparatus, city hall, the police, or whatever, are perpetuated, socially, by our beliefs in their legitimacy and necessity. Berkman states, government and capitalism are the forms in which the popular ideas express themselves. Ideas are the foundation. The institutions are the house built upon it. Social ideas must change first, before a new social structure can be built. Now I know politics is downstream from culture is a Breitbart reactionary meme, but in many ways it's not wrong. Sure, there's plenty of things those with political power do that we didn't ask for, but politicians were not at the forefront of fights for abolishing slavery, or women's suffrage, or labor rights, or civil rights, or LGBT plus rights, or decriminalizing marijuana and stuff like that. No, activists, the people, fought tooth and nail for decades to bring that stuff to mainstream prominence, and only then did politicians support these causes for votes and clout and political capital. Berkman then explains that anarchist revolution is not about destruction, but about creation. He states, "What really is there to destroy? The wealth of the rich? Nay, that is something we want the whole of society to enjoy. The land, the fields, the coal mines, the railroads, factories, mills, and shops, these we want not to destroy, but to make useful to the entire people." But this isn't just a physical reorganization of society, but a moral one, a social one, a social revolution, if you will. Berkman states, "The social revolution means much more than the reorganization of conditions only. It means the establishment of new human values and social relationships, a changed attitude of man to man, as of one free and independent to his equal. It means a different spirit in individual and collective life." So wait, does this mean that anarcho-capitalists like Murray Rothbard are correct that anarcho-communists just want humans to have a totally new and different human nature before anarchism can be attained? No. I mean, look at books like Mutual Aid by Kropotkin. Our desires to work together in collaboration aren't as unnatural as one might think. We just need to win popular support for these ideas. In regards to gaining popular support and making this paradigm shift, Berkman states, "The first preparatory work of the revolution consists in winning over the masses at large in favor of the revolution and its objects. Winning them over, at least to the extent of neutralizing them, of turning them from active enemies into passive sympathizers." This is something we must keep in mind when advocating not just for social revolution, but for leftist politics in general. The goal isn't, and can't be, to take every single person and make them the most woke, militant, anarcho-communist revolutionary on the planet. Rather, we must meet people where they are and try and bring them left from there. Turning leftists into anarchists, liberals into leftists, centrists into liberals, conservatives into centrists, Nazis into conservatives, and then centrists and liberals, as Berkman said, active enemies into passive sympathizers. Next, Berkman explains that the main goal of the social revolution is the abolition of government and of economic inequality, and the socialization of the means of production and distribution. Deprived of that power, governors and rulers become just ordinary men like you and me, common citizens among millions of others. To accomplish that is consequently the primal and most vital function of the social revolution. Okay, so it's revolution. Are you ready to fight in the revolution?
Revolution.
Well, here's what Berkman suggests. The strength of labor is not in the field of battle, it is in the shop, in the mine and factory. There lies its power, that no army in the world can defeat, no human agency can conquer. In other words, the social revolution can take place only by means of a general strike. You can shoot people to death, but you can't shoot them to work. Now perhaps you're thinking, wait a minute, my workplace will be the focal point of the revolution? But I hate my job. Why would I want my job to be a bigger part of my life? Why would I want my shitty job that sucks out all my energy and joy to be the epicenter of my revolutionary struggle? Well, what do you hate about your job? That you're unappreciated? That your boss is an incompetent asshole? That your conditions are miserable? That you're often doing pointless busy work? That you're always stuck with all the unsavory grunt work? Well, what if you had control over the workplace? Wouldn't you run it differently? If you had democratic control over your workplace, that incompetent asshole boss would be gone. You could designate resources to improve the conditions of your workstation. You could eliminate pointless busy work. And you could distribute the unsavory but required tasks more evenly among the workforce. Perhaps your thought process is in the other direction. Perhaps you're thinking, no offense, but I work with the stupidest, laziest people in the world. They couldn't run the workplace themselves. No way. If this is what you think, then I direct you to my reviews of books like Paracon and Democracy at Work, which more thoroughly explain how worker-controlled workplaces would function. But for my part, I'll say this. Do you think that the perceived stupidity or laziness is inherent to the coworker, to the person? Or do you think it's a byproduct of, as I mentioned just a second ago, being unappreciated, the boss is an incompetent asshole, the conditions are miserable, there's a lot of busy work, and things like that? Because I've worked like over 10 different minimum wage jobs over the years, working fast food, department stores, thrift stores, pet stores, liquor stores, grocery stores, etc. And I've met several single parents and people who run D&D campaigns and college students and people who make podcasts and thespians and musicians and filmmakers and artists and craftsmen. Basically, People who demonstrate a great degree of dedication and time management and resource allocation and all these skills that are needed to run a workplace. They just didn't bother applying those skills in a job that gives them no agency and pays them next to nothing and treats them like a cog in a machine. Here's how Berkman explains it. Every factory, mine, and mill should have its special workers' council, separate from and independent of the shop committee, for the purpose of familiarizing the workers with the various phases of their particular industry, including the sources of raw materials, the consecutive process of manufacture, byproducts, and manner of distribution. This industrial council should be permanent, but its membership must rotate in such a manner as to take in practically all the employees of a given factory or mill. Again, this is essentially what is called balanced job complexes in the book Paracon, or what is called worker self-directed enterprises in the book Democracy at Work, so look there if you want a more detailed explanation. The idea is that a democratic workplace can function most effectively when all workers have some understanding and participation in all tasks involved, so they will be better prepared for participation in that democratic process. For example, I work as a dishwasher right now, and let's say tomorrow my workplace became democratic. Well, I kind of like my job as it is, so there really isn't a need to spread the work around for sharing unsavory tasks reasons, but does my work provide me with enough information about the workplace to prepare me to properly participate in the workers' council? Certainly not. But perhaps, if I controlled the ordering of new dishes and utensils, or maybe I controlled the communication with the mechanics who come in and repair the various kitchen appliances, well then I would have some buy-in. I would have tasks at the workplace that rely and build on communication with other employees, and gives me plenty to contribute in the workers' council. But Berkman doesn't just want to distribute the tasks of the system as it is, but to improve on working conditions overall. He argues, the main purpose of the social revolution must be the immediate betterment of conditions for the masses. The success of the revolution fundamentally depends on it. This can be achieved only by organizing consumption and production so as to be of real benefit to the populace. In that lies the greatest, in fact the only, security of the social revolution. Okay, sure, so all this might work within one workplace, or even a collection of workplaces, but how would this social revolution democratic workplace stuff fulfill the functions of representative national democracy, of democratic government? Berkman's solution is this. Shop and factory committees, organized locally by district, region, and state, and federated nationally, will be the bodies best suited to carry on revolutionary production. Local and state labor councils, federated nationally, will be the form of organization most apt to manage distribution by means of the people's cooperatives. These committees, elected by the workers on the job, connect their shop and factory with other shops and factories of the same industry. The joint council of an entire industry links that industry with other industries, and thus is formed a federation of labor councils for the entire country. Okay, cool. Standard anarchist stuff. Federated democratic councils at various levels, all nested in on each other. It's kind of like the shop manager, district manager, regional manager, board of directors structure we have now, but rather than being top-down, undemocratic, authoritarian hierarchy, it would be bottom-up, democratic, decentralized self-management. And how would this affect the economy as a whole? If there isn't markets or capitalism, what will we do? Berkman explains, there will be no buying or selling. The revolution abolishes private ownership of the means of production and distribution, and with it goes capitalistic business. Personal possessions remain only in the things you use. Thus, your watch is your own, but the watch factory belongs to the people. Land, machinery, and other public utilities will be collective property, neither to be bought nor sold. Now this may sound like everything will be just like nationalized, but because of the anarchist, decentralized, federated, bottom-up structure that we just discussed, this will in fact be local control of the means of production. Berkman continues, exchange will be free. The coal miners, for instance, will deliver the coal they mined to the public coal yards for the use of the community. Remember, this was written in the 1920s, so for our modern purposes, pretend he's talking about smartphones and food and chew toys or whatever. In their turn, the miners will receive from the community's warehouses the machinery, tools, and other commodities they need. That means free exchange without the medium of money and without profit, on the basis of requirements and the supply on hand. Berkman summarizes the social revolution thusly. The first effect of the revolution is reduced production, the general strike. The essential needs of the people must be satisfied, In that stage, the revolution lives on the supplies already on hand. Basically expropriation of the surpluses of capitalism, all these stores and warehouses of goods that already exist. It should be clearly understood that the social revolution necessitates more intense production than under capitalism, in order to supply the needs of the large masses who till then have lived in penury. You know, the whole reason we're doing this revolution is to improve everyone's standard of living. Now, what about spies and rebels and counter-revolutionaries and all that? Berkman may have argued that the strength of labor is not in the field of battle, it's in the shop, but unfortunately that doesn't make the revolution free from the field of battle altogether. As Berkman states, the armed workers and peasants are the only effective defense of the revolution. By means of their unions and syndicates, they must always be on guard against counter-revolutionary attack. Berkman continues, counter-revolution can feed only on popular discontent. Where the masses are conscious that the revolution and all its activities are in their own hands, that they themselves are managing things and are free to change their methods when they consider it necessary, counter-revolution can find no support and is harmless. To restrain them would serve only to create a persecuted class, and thereby enlist popular sympathy for them and their cause. Essentially, the goal is to treat violent counter-revolutionary action with self-defense, and all other counter-revolutionary action with kindness, trusting that their interaction with the revolutionary community will tamper their beliefs. For example, Berkman argues one solution would be to disperse counter-revolutionaries so that they aren't so insular and that they have to engage with the community at large. I mean, this is basically something we already do with people involved in hate groups. We try to get some space between them and their insular communities, try to get them interacting with society at large. Same rules apply here, except I suspect a collectivist, cooperative, anarcho-communist society will handle this much better than our current individualist, atomized, alienating capitalist society. And Berkman concludes the text stating, "Let liberty become our faith and our deed, and we shall grow strong therein. Only liberty can make the social revolution effective and wholesome. It alone can pave the way to greater heights and prepare a society where well-being and joy shall be the heritage of all. Then will dawn the day when man shall, for the first time, have full opportunity to grow and expand in the free and generous sunshine of anarchy." Conclusion. Well, that's basically all we want as anarcho-communists. Everyone will have a free workplace and free house and free internet and free video games and food and free college, and no one will work, and we'll all have a unicorn. A unicorn? Why is it not an unicorn? Okay, that's not the point. The point is that this silly utopianism isn't the point. Real anarcho-communism isn't about these utopian ideas, it's about realizing our rational self-interest. I mean, of course, there are some flowery moral considerations like compassion and a sense of justice and all that, but the anarcho-communist worldview is just the logical conclusion of maximizing freedom and autonomy. I want low-income workers to have sufficient lives so they aren't an undue burden on social services or turning to crime to make ends meet. I want people to be aided in times of need like addiction or injury or job loss or other emergencies, because I'd like that support to be there if I or my loved ones needs it. I want to remove barriers to education because I want to live amongst an educated citizenry. I want inequality to decrease, since studies have shown that inequality exacerbates crime and other social unrest. I want to provide drug treatment and healthcare and housing to those who need it, since that will be much cheaper and more effective than our current practice of arresting and re-arresting people. I want our workplaces to be democratic, because studies suggest that workers are happier and more dedicated, and the workplace functions better when workers have democratic control. I want to collectivize the ownership of the means of production, because private appropriation of socialized production leads to unfair advantages in the market, and the coercion of those who don't own those means of production, and the creation of class warfare. Basically, you keep expanding this very reasonable and rational demand for freedom and self-actualization and autonomy in society, and you end up at anarcho-communism.
If there was no government, wouldn't there be chaos? Everybody running round, setting petrol pumps off.
Well, perhaps not without the social revolution through a general strike. Anyway. So, if you want a crash course in anarchism, if you want to know how an anarchist philosophy explains the flaws in society of violent government and coercive capitalism, and you want to know what an anarchist philosophy proposes as the solution, how to build an anarchist society, then I recommend the ABC, I still think it should be ABCs, The ABC of Anarchism by Alexander Berkman. And as always, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons. Your tremendous support has allowed me to get dog insurance, which is wonderful. You've allowed me to support other creators I couldn't otherwise support, so I gotta love that. You provide me with a little extra funds for books and dog toys and stuff, which is really awesome. I appreciate you folks a lot. And if you like what I do here and you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/radicalreviewer. And if you're interested in radical theory, looking for a book recommendation or whatever, you can get your radical reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.
And we don't know when, but the days will come again that their courts can't hold us in. We'll stand our ground no matter how many police appear. Captains go down with the ship, my friends, and we're all captains here.
What kind of garbage is that? Oops, my